Who's the GOAT? What makes a great rapper? Hip hop, history, art, and culture. Written and narrated by Eric Leo. Introduction. I'm a rapper, but I'm also a philosopher. Not just in the academic sense. I mean, I ask questions most people argue about, but never slow down to define. Hip-hop raised me, challenged me, and taught me how to think in public. Bars are ideas under pressure. Flow is logic with rhythm. If you don't believe that, this book probably isn't for you. This book exists because hip-hop argues about who's the GOAT nonstop and almost never agrees on why. We argue feelings, nostalgia, numbers, bias, and identity all at once. That's not a debate. That's noise. I wanted to slow down and actually ask, what makes a rapper great? Not your favorite, not who you grew up on. Great. You'll notice I spend a lot of time on history. That's not accidental. If you want to know where hip-hop is going, you have to know where it's been, especially when it comes to the MC. This isn't a producer book. This isn't about beat selection or sound design. This is about the artist on the mic, the voice, the message, the presence, the craft. We'll talk about where hip-hop came from and why rap clearly meets the definition of art, not emotionally, literally. We'll look at what history says makes a great artist in any medium and see how rap stacks up. We'll also break down where the term GOAT actually came from and how it became hip-hop language and then was ingrained in popular culture. I'll reference what prominent figures say about their GOATs, not to crown winners, but to expose patterns. When legends talk about greatness, they're rarely talking about the same thing fans are. That gap matters. Then we get to the real point of the book, a framework, a point system, not because numbers are perfect, but because they force honesty. You'll see exactly what's being rewarded and what isn't, and yes, it's subjective. It has to be. Art lives in context. Criteria changes as the culture changes. That doesn't make evaluation useless. It makes it real. At the end, I'll tell you who my GOAT is and why. You don't have to agree. In fact, if you don't argue with me at least once, this book has failed. Let's talk history. Chapter 1. History is hip-hop. If you want to know where you're going, you have to know where you've been. Hip-hop doesn't evolve randomly. Every shift in style, content, and technique is a response to conditions on the ground. Poverty, policing, technology, industry pressure, and at the center of it all is the MC. This chapter focuses on the MC because the MC is the artist. The MC is the voice, the storyteller, the competitor, and eventually the cultural figure we argue about when we say GOAT. Hip-hop begins in the Bronx in the early 1970s, in neighborhoods gutted by redlining, white flight, and city neglect. Buildings were burning, jobs were gone, schools were underfunded, traditional paths to power were closed. Hip-hop didn't start as music. It started as a solution. DJs like Kool Herc looped break beats because records were expensive and people needed somewhere to go. The party was survival. The MC originally existed to serve the DJ. Early MCs introduced records, hyped the crowd, and kept energy high. This wasn't about writing verses. It was about presence. Can you move people? Could you command attention without losing the beat? Could you talk for minutes straight without killing momentum? Early MC skill was measured live, not on paper. As parties grew and crews formed, Competition became inevitable. MCs started battling for dominance. This is where rhyme patterns, timing, and crowd control began to matter more. Bragging wasn't ego, it was structure. You asserted your worth because nobody else was going to do it for you. The earliest rap lyrics were simple, repetitive, and functional because they had to be heard over noise and understood instantly. That changes when MCs realize they can say more. The first major turning point in MC history is when rap becomes message-driven. This is where Melly Mel enters the conversation. With the message, the MC is no longer just narrating the party. He's narrating the block. This matters because it proves rap can document reality in real time. It's journalism without editors, poetry without permission. From this point forward, the MC has responsibility whether they want it or not. The 1980s marked the professionalization of the MC. Records are pressed. Tours expand. Radio enters the picture. This is also when technical skill becomes unavoidable. You can't rely on hype alone anymore. The beat repeats. The listener rewinds. Weak writing gets exposed. Then Rakim changes everything. Rakim introduces internal rhyme schemes, relaxed delivery, and complex phrasing that treats the beat as a grid instead of a ceiling. He doesn't chase the rhythm, he bends it. After Rakim, MCs are judged differently. Complexity becomes a standard. Lyricism becomes measurable. From here on out, ignorance is not an excuse. The late 1980s and early 1990s explode outward. Hip-hop becomes regional. New York no longer owns the sound. The West Coast develops its own identity rooted in gang culture, police brutality, and street politics. The South begins forming its own rhythm and cadences. This matters because MC greatness now includes perspective. Where you're from shapes how you rap, not just what you say. The 1990s are often called the golden age for a reason. This is when MCs master multiple disciplines at once: lyricism, storytelling, flow, image, and consistency. Nas brings dense street poetry and cinematic detail. The Notorious B.I.G. perfects flow, timing, and narrative clarity. Tupac weaponizes emotion, vulnerability, and political urgency. None of these MCs sound alike. That's important. Hip-hop doesn't reward sameness. It rewards effectiveness. If your voice fits your truth and reaches people, it works. Battling remains central during this era. From park jams to radio freestyles, competition sharpens skill. You couldn't hide behind marketing. You had to perform. That's why presence matters so much in hip-hop history. A great MC had to survive live environments before studio polish existed. As the industry grows, so do the tensions. The late 1990s and early 2000s introduced corporate influence on a massive scale. Sales become a dominant metric. Media narratives simplify complexity. The MC is no longer just an artist. They are a brand, a spokesperson, and a product. This is where debates about authenticity begin to intensify. Still, the MC adapts. The 2000s show MCs spanning eras, sounds, and audiences. Technical skill rises. Subject matter diversifies. The internet changes discovery forever. You can no longer control the narrative from one coast or one label. This era introduces a new problem: access without context. People hear the music without understanding the lineage. That's how bad debates are born. Here's the truth. Hip-hop was always meant to be a voice for the voiceless. When people say they hate hip-hop because of its subject matter, they're usually reacting to corporate, filtered versions of the culture. The glorification of guns and violence, degrading women, and financial irresponsibility and material consumption is all approved by record executives that set the stage for smaller artists to follow the playbook. However, real hip-hop talks about what people live through. Real hip-hop talks about the culture and is the voice for the underrepresented. Most people don't like corporate rap because of its immoral themes, but when they listen to real hip-hop and realize its true meaning, they appreciate its message. Honesty has always been the original message. That's why MC history matters more than charts alone. Every great MC responds to the moment they're in while pushing the form forward. They don't just rap well, they change expectations. You can't judge who's the greatest without knowing four things: what rules existed when they arrived, which rules they broke, who they influenced, and what doors they opened for others. Miss any one of these, and the conversation collapses into opinion instead of evaluation. What rules existed when they arrived? Every era has limits, whether people admit it or not. Those limits tell you what an MC is allowed to be at that moment. Early MCs were expected to hype the crowd, period. Dense writing wasn't the job. Cleverness came second to energy. By the mid-'80s, as rap moved onto records, the rule became structure. Rhyme on beat. Keep patterns clean. Don't confuse the listener. MCs were rewarded for clarity and repetition, not depth. When Rakim arrived, the rule was that rappers followed the beat bar by bar. Rakim ignored that completely. He rapped through the beat instead of on top of it. He stacked internal rhymes, stretched phrases, and stayed calm while doing it. After Rakim, lyrical complexity wasn't optional anymore. The ceiling moved. In the early 90s, the rule for street rap was separation. You could be realistic or lyrical, but rarely both. If you talked about the streets, it was expected to be raw and direct, not layered or poetic. Nas broke that by turning street detail into literature. He proved realism didn't have to be simple, and lyricism didn't have to be detached from lived experience. By the late 90s, as rap became fully mainstream, a new rule took over. Aggression and polish sold. Toughness was rewarded. Emotional range was limited. Vulnerability was seen as soft, especially for men. This is where artists like Tupac stood out because he refused to choose one emotion. He could be militant, reflective, angry, and broken in the same body of work. That was uncomfortable for the culture, which is exactly why it mattered. Then the 2000s changed the sound again. Technical skill exploded. Punchlines, metaphors, and mixtape culture raised the pace. But another rule settled in quietly. Introspection was allowed, but only in controlled doses. You could talk about pain, but not insecurity. You could struggle, but not doubt yourself publicly. That rule didn't survive Kanye West. Kanye broke the idea that rappers had to perform invincibility. He talked openly about insecurity, ego, faith, fear, grief, and mental conflict. Not as side notes, but as the main subject. Sonically, he broke rules too, pulling from soul, electronic music, gospel, and minimalist production, forcing MCs to adapt to new emotional spaces. After Kanye, vulnerability wasn't a weakness, it became a lane. That shift carries into today. Modern MCs operate in a world where genre boundaries are loose, emotional honesty is expected, and individuality matters more than fitting a mold. But those freedoms didn't appear randomly. They were earned by artists who violated expectations and survived the backlash. You can't call someone great without knowing what they're expected to do when they arrive. Greatness isn't just skill. It's pressure applied to limits of an era until they crack. Which rules they broke. Great MCs don't just excel inside the box. They changed the shape of it. Rakim broke the rule that complexity had to sound busy. He proved you could be intricate and calm. Tupac broke the rule that toughness meant emotional distance. He cried, raged, reflected, and politicized all in one career. The Notorious B.I.G. broke the rule that lyrical rappers couldn't be commercially dominant by marrying technical flow with mainstream appeal. Later, Lil Wayne broke structure itself, treating metaphors like punchlines and freestyles like albums. Rule breaking isn't rebellion for its own sake, it's expansion. Who they influenced. Influence is where greatness becomes measurable. Rakim influenced almost every lyrical rapper who came after him. You can draw a straight line from Rakim to Nas to Eminem to modern technical lyricists. Nas influenced an entire generation of storytellers who believed street detail could be literary. Biggie influenced flow more than almost anyone alive. You still hear his cadence echoed in rappers decades later. Tupac influenced artists who prioritized message, vulnerability, and emotional connection over technical perfection. If people don't sound different because you existed, your impact is limited. What doors they opened for others. This is the part fans ignore the most. Great MCs don't just succeed, they make success possible for others. Rakim raised the bar so high that labels had to take lyricism seriously. Nas helped solidify New York street poetry as a viable lane. Tupac proved you could be political, emotional, and commercially massive at the same time. Lil Wayne normalized experimentation, mixtape dominance, and creative freedom in a way that reshaped how careers are built. Kendrick Lamar later walked through doors opened by all of them, combining concept albums, cultural critique, and mainstream reach. The term GOAT didn't come from sports debate shows or social media timelines. It came from hip-hop. LL Cool J popularized it by openly calling himself the greatest of all time at a moment when hip-hop was still rooted in competition and self-assertion. He cemented the term with his 2000 album, Greatest of All Time, GOAT. Saying you were the GOAT wasn't marketing. It was a challenge that invited comparison, scrutiny, and response. Over time, the term escaped culture and entered the mainstream, where people now casually say athletes like Tom Brady are the GOAT, often without knowing the phrase started as hip-hop language. That matters, because the GOAT debate was born in a culture that valued skill, impact, and dominance, not consensus or comfort. Greatness multiplies itself. That's why the MC is the through line of hip-hop history. Sounds change, trends cycle, technology evolves. But the artist on the mic is the cultural engine. They carry the rules, break them, influence the next wave, and widen the lane behind them. Now that we understand how to measure artistic impact honestly, we can move to the next contention without guessing. Hip-hop is art. Chapter 2. Hip-hop is art. Before we argue about who's the GOAT, we have to settle something more basic. Not emotionally, not culturally, literally. Is hip-hop art? Art, at its simplest, is intentional human expression that communicates meaning, emotion, or ideas through skill and form. That's it. No museum required, no approval from elites. By that definition, hip-hop qualifies immediately. Lyrics are language shaped by rhythm. Flow is structure. Delivery is performance. Production is composition. The intent is communication. The skill is measurable. The audience response is real. Hip-hop isn't like art. It is art. Historically, every major art form starts out disrespected. Jazz was called noise. Rock was called immoral. The novel was once considered unserious compared to poetry. What changes is not the form. What changes is who gets to decide what counts. Hip-hop followed that same path. Dismissed early, profitable later, studied last. When you strip away the bias, rap checks every box. A good artist historically does a few basic things well. They have technical control over their medium. A painter understands color and form. A writer understands language and structure. A musician understands rhythm and timing. In hip-hop, this translates into rhyme control, cadence, breath, timing, and delivery. If you can't control the tools, you're not good. Period. A good artist is also consistent. One great moment doesn't make a career. Sustained quality matters. This is why nobody seriously argues that one-hit wonders belong in GOAT conversations. Art rewards repetition of excellence, not accidents. Objectively good artists across history share these traits. They master fundamentals. They communicate clearly. They improve over time. In hip-hop terms, this is where technically strong MCs live. They rap well. They perform well. They understand the craft. But greatness is different. Great artists don't just execute. They expand. Historically, great artists changed how the medium is understood. Pablo Picasso didn't just paint well. He broke representation itself. William Shakespeare didn't just write plays. He reshaped language and storytelling. Miles Davis didn't just play jazz. He reinvented it multiple times. The pattern is always the same. Great artists introduce new rules or destroy old ones, influence generations that follow, and force institutions to adjust around them. Hip-hop has its own version of this. Rakim didn't just rap well. He redefined lyrical structure. Tupac didn't just make songs. He expanded the emotional and political range of rap. The Notorious B.I.G. didn't just have flow. He set a standard that still gets copied. Kanye West didn't just release albums. He forced hip-hop to accept vulnerability, genre fusion, and self-contradiction as valid artistic territory. Kendrick Lamar didn't just tell stories. He brought literary structure and cultural critique into mainstream rap without sacrificing reach. These artists aren't just good. They changed expectations. That's the key difference between good and great. A good artist operates inside the form. A great artist reshapes it so future artists operate differently. After them, the rules are never the same. Art also changes the world, not always directly, but persistently. It shifts language. It reframes identity. It makes invisible lives visible. Hip-hop did that globally. It gave marginalized communities a way to document their reality without permission. It influenced fashion, speech, politics, advertising, and youth culture worldwide. Hip-hop didn't just reflect society, it reshaped it. That's why dismissing hip-hop as not real art was never an honest critique. It was a power move, the same one used against every disruptive art form before it. And like those before it, hip-hop outlasted the criticism. Once you accept hip-hop as art, the GOAT debate changes. You can't just count hits. You can't just argue popularity. You have to ask the same questions we ask in every serious art discussion. Who mastered the craft? Who broke rules? Who influenced generations? Who expanded the form? That's where the framework comes in. Now that we've established hip-hop as art, we can talk about how to evaluate greatness without guessing.